Hello, my friends. Yes, it is that time. It's Torah time with Jimmy, and I am Rabbi Jimmy here. I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. I'm going to be changing the format up a little bit on this channel. So rather than going through some topics and in-depth studies, what I want to do is kind of get back to the basics for a while, and I want to see how that goes. And what I'm going to do is start to tell various stories of the Bible. And tell them in a story format, explain them in a story format, and try to draw out the intended meaning, what those stories mean to us, these powerful stories about God's deliverance, about God's presence, and what that means to us. So what I want to do is I'm going to start out with the book of Joshua, and I'm going to be talking about Joshua's victory over the city of Ai. If you like this format, please let me know down in the comments. Put those things down in the comments so I can get some feedback. Feedback is always good, okay? And if you would like, share, and subscribe as well, that would be greatly, greatly appreciated. That helps us keep this channel moving. It also helps provide encouragement to keep doing this channel, okay? So what I want to do is talk about the story of Ai and the city of Ai. So what we see coming up to this point is that God had delivered Israel, okay? God had delivered Israel from Egypt. Of course, we know they wandered in the desert for 40 years. And then God appointed Joshua to replace Israel. And he says to Joshua, it's time for you to cross the land. Cross over the Jordan into the land. Of course, he does so. And we will go into those stories a little bit later. We also find that the story of Jericho, and most of us know this story, and God's defeat at the hand of Jericho. I'm sorry. Boy, that didn't come out right, did it? Jericho's defeat at the hand of God. Okay, Israel didn't really have to do much other than just simple acts of obedience. Israel didn't have to do much. So that was God's victory and God's victory alone. And what we find is that there was somebody amongst the children of Israel who took it upon themselves to disobey God. And we're going to learn that in just a moment. So what we have is that the next step is for Israel to attack the city of Ai. And this is Israel's really first opportunity to take a stand, to do what God had called them to do, to go in and to take out the Canaanites, to wipe out their culture, to remove their influence, their negative, evil, wicked influence from you. So, and to do this according to God's instructions, but knowing that it was time to take the next step. In other words, this victory would come as a cooperative effort between Israel and God. Israel was required to do the fighting in this case. They weren't just to sit back as witnesses, but they were to do the fighting in this case. So what we find here is that the children of Israel attack the city of Ai, and they quickly retreat because they find 36 men die in the process. It doesn't seem like a whole lot in today's standards, but that was a defeat to them. And they quickly retreated, and they began to wonder why. Where was God at in this? Why did God allow us to get defeated here? And it quickly became apparent that the one, Achan, the one who had stolen from the spoils of Jericho, was to blame. Okay. What do you mean he stole from the spoils of Jericho? Well, God told Israel not to take anything from Jericho. Why? Because that was God's victory. These were holy items. These were items that were set aside to destruction because they belonged to God. God had performed the victory, not Israel. Okay, and because somebody in the camp had failed to recognize this and had dishonored God's name, God poured judgment out upon the community of Israel and failed to give them victory. So after they had repented, Joshua repented, Israel repented, Ai was taken out and he was punished because of that great sin. He was punished and he was stoned to death. And then Joshua said, this time he says, okay, now it is time to relook at this. And rather than just go in like a bull in a china shop, I need to have a strategy here. So that's what he does. He organizes a strategy, and it's a pretty effective strategy. Joshua shows himself to be a great military strategist. So what he does is that he sends 30,000 men to attack the city of Ai. And then once the city of Ai responds, they come out to face the men. Joshua's men retreat. They leave. And it looks like they are retreating in defeat, right? And this, to an overconfident eye, remember, I had just defeated Israel a short time earlier. To an overconfident eye, this looked like, okay, we're going to do this again. We're going to take care of them once and for all. So they leave. And then here comes Joshua's secondary men. Well, I say secondary men, but another group. Okay, so Joshua takes a spear and he lights a fire on it as a signal, and he tells the men, okay, the city, the men, the fighting men of the city have left. Now it's time to go seize the vulnerable city of Ai. And he does so, and he attacks the city of Ai, and he sets it on fire. Okay, brilliant strategy. Have the men chase after Israel, and then the city is left vulnerable, and then other men are able to go in and defeat the city. Once that had taken place, it was a no-brainer that the city of Ai was controlled, was defeated. And in this case, because the children of Israel did win the victory, they were allowed to take the spoils. Now, on the surface, it seems like this victory was Israel and Israel's alone, right? Because they're the one, Joshua set up a strategy, they're the ones who went in there and fight. But to the follower of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, you know that God is with them in their midst at all times. Yes, this was a brilliant military strategy, but God was in their midst the whole time, and God allowed this to happen. It could have easily went sideways, but God's presence was in their midst the whole time. It was the hand of God that ultimately brought victory, but God caused Israel to be a part of that process, not just witnesses, not just idol buyers, but to be a part of that process. What we also see is a minor retreat, and I don't misunderstand me. Okay, God is in their midst, but what we do see is a minor retreat of the presence of God in the midst of Israel enters the land. Remember, up to this point, God had provided everything that Israel could need. Okay, and that included military victory. That included food and water and everything else. But once she entered into the land, once Israel entered the land, okay, they were to work the land themselves. They were to work hard. They were to achieve victory themselves. They were not to just sit back idly by and watch miracles happen, but they were to be co-owners of the land. The land owned by God, of course, but they were to be co-workers of the land. They were to work hard. They were to work with the sweat of their brow. They were also to defend their land. They were also to go to battle, to defeat the Canaanites, and to make sure that the evil that resided in the land was removed. And of course, we know how that ended up. God's hand was still in the midst of Israel, but it was on a much more subtle way. God allowed Israel to pave her own way rather than allow God to just pave the entire way for her. Israel would need to pave her own way. She would need to act in faith, by driving out the inhabitants herself, as God would be with her every step of the way. It is important to not to mistake God's apparent silence for lack of involvement. Just because we can't see the miraculous hand of God in this case doesn't mean that God's hand isn't there. And I think that's a testimony that we can see in our own lives as well. That just because we can't always see the miraculous hand of God doesn't mean that God's hand isn't in it and is not with us each and every day. Okay? Instead, God gives us the opportunity to seek him and ultimately to find him. So sometimes we can't see his hand readily because God wants us to seek him out and to take the opportunity to find him in our midst. It is a still small voice that God speaks to Joshua, that God speaks to the children of Israel, and that God speaks to us each and every day. It is the wind that calls out to us. When we seek him, ultimately we know he will respond and we will find him. And I think ultimately that's the lesson here, is that transition of Israel entering into the promised land, that transitioning from the defeat of Jericho to the defeat of Ai, that Israel had to transition from being bystanders and witnesses to now being active participants in the plans of God. And that's a message for us too. We are active participants within the plans of God, knowing that He has nothing but good in store for us. And He is with us all the way, but He has also caused us to act on those promises. All right, so that is the end of this lesson. And the next lesson, we are going to be looking at the story of Gideon. We're going to be looking at Gideon, and that story will probably take place in two parts because it's a little bit longer. Part of this new format as well is that I'm trying to keep it around 10 minutes or so if possible. So these are bite-sized chunks. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Again, please leave a message, like, share, and subscribe, and we will see you soon. Out. Bye.